Jai Bab, everybody. This is somewhat the talk I gave at the Southeast Gathering, with a few variations in it. And it starts off with introduction, then I get on to talk about Francis's Ghazals a little bit. So I want to start with, well, first of all, how nice it is for Jen and I to be here. It's the joy of the pilgrim going to different places where Baba's been, because you get to sense, oh yeah, that's Baba. But then there's a slight little twist, a little personality trait of some sort, and it's that's sort of the joy of the pilgrim to experience that. Here it's so enchanting. Baba seems to envelop you. Walking along the paths, it's just, they're long enough to know that you don't get too familiar with them. So, oh, I'm lost here on the path with Baba, You meander, then Baba's house comes into view. It's different from Avatar's abode, where we live. Avatar's abode, Baba is sort of in potential. It's like this great big throb that comes from Baba's room. It has a different feel. And of course, Meherazad has a different feel. And Maya House, where we were, Jen and I lived next door, has a different feel again. Baba was very happy there, and it has that quality about it. So it's just beautiful to be here again, and to be with family. Although we're not related directly, we are related in the most intimate way with Baba as our father. I want to start with a quote. This is from Listen Humanity, and it's taken from the 1955 Sahavas, which were held at Meherazad for the men. And Francis Brabazon and Don Stevens were the only two Westerners who were there. And it was one of the themes of this Sahavas was to do with working for Baba. And this is the quote. Baba says, "To spread my love among the people, you have to make them understand me as you understand me. For that, you have to bring them to love me as you love me. And that means you have to cause them to feel my love as you feel it." Which is sort of interesting. Baba doesn't want us just to go cold canvassing with books. This is a different sort of an approach. And out of this came two books. Don Stevens' Listen Humanity, which I think is probably the most distributed book, Baba book, around. Harper and Row picked it up, a big publisher. I don't know what the figures are, but I think it would be up there. And Francis' Stay with God. Baba said to Francis, you had written Journey with God, which was his 1954 visit, and then he said, now you've stayed with God, and he gave that title. What's interesting about those two books is how strongly they contrast. And even Don with Francis. Don was university educated, he was a businessman. Even on that occasion, I think he turns up in a suit with a Panama hat, looking very flash and debonair. Francis is this rustic, sort of slightly bohemian artist type who turns up. They're completely different. And Don Stevens' book, his style is very conversational. It's rather conversational. It sort of gets you in. It's very attractive that way. Francis' style is really distilling words. There's no fat on his words at all. It's all very distilled. So they're two different books altogether. But I would say that both of them have addressed what Baba said exactly. That you should express me as you understand me. You should express your love for me as you feel it. Francis, how that came through in Francis was stay with God. He was a poet. How it came through with Don Stevens was this much more of a talkative, conversational, very friendly sort of tone to the whole book. And they're both perfect books in their own way. And I think that's a good point. In that same period, pretty well at the end of that same quote I just read, Baba says, I need no preachers and teachers. And then, but he doesn't say, I need no artists. Yay. Because I think, I was actually, before I came here, I was watching this Billy Graham documentary. And Billy Graham was, wonderful power and presence, and was really definitely, I think, struck by God, really, felt inflamed him. But that whole style, I think, with Baba is just not his style. I just sort of feel, well, maybe I'm wrong there, but he seems to be, he says here, we need no preachers and teachers. And I think art is a good way of doing it, which expresses how you understand God, how you feel it. That's an artistic manifesto there. That's really a license for an artist to work. That's really how they should do it. And I think love has to be like that. It's creative. Love is creative, so it has to come through with that. And of course, with artwork, you just put it up, like around the wall here, and it just sits there. It's not propaganda, it's not evangelized. It just sort of sits there and as a statement, not even a statement, it's just there as an open thing, presents itself, and you take it or leave it. That's what the artist obviously felt when they did the work. There's a note here I put down what Francis said about evangelizing. He said, which is sort of interesting, evangelism is message minus beauty. Evangelism is message minus beauty of form. Beauty of form. And so is no message. Because God-man is beauty itself. Isn't that lovely? Evangelism is message minus beauty of form, and so is no message, because God-man is beauty itself. So this evening, I'd just like to present a sort of a collage of ideas, put them on the wall, so to speak, and let them speak for themselves. Erich used to have this wonderful expression in Mundley Hall when you'd sit down with him, he'd say, this is what I've gathered. He wouldn't say, this is it, I've been with Baba for all my life, and this is the truth, and you better jot it down, and this is dogma. He said, this is what I've gathered, so humble, and this is the best I can do, and I'm going to share that with you. So that's a sort of a nice way, I think, of Baba people to start things. So let me start. I want to start with an introduction here and then move into the Ghazals. It all starts with God speaks, doesn't it? With the who am I question, Baba says. This whim God gets to ask, who am I? And it's this detailed overview of the whole consciousness of the soul developing till the human form. It's a monumental work, and Baba insisted that people should read it. Not insisted, but, stressed that people should read that. But then at the end, he has this unbelievable statement. Nevertheless, and I quote, nevertheless, all that is said here and explained about God to appease the intellectual convulsions of the mind. I mean, that's should be in Latin above sort of universities, All this is to appease the intellectual convulsions of man. Still lacks many more words and further explanation, because the truth is that reality must be realized and the divinity of God must be attained and lived. So as they say, God is a verb, not a noun. God has to be lived. God has to be, it's something, it's an action. But how do you know this? God speaks. I don't know why it's not called God-man speaks. God speaks. But how do we get to this point of knowing the divinity of God must be attained and lived? I think this is where the God-man comes in, himself. He takes responsibility for that. God-man speaks. And then when I was planning what to say in this talk, I came across that question which Erich asked Baba. He said, what about Baba? What am I going to tell people who ask, who is Meher Baba? What's the answer I should give them? And Baba gives this extraordinary answer. He says, tell them, Erich, He says, he is, but he's referring to Baba. Baba replied, he is the essence of your very being which provokes you to ask the question. He is the essence of your very being which provokes you to ask the question. So, looking at that logically, he knew you before you asked the question. He's the one who provoked you to ask it, and we've all asked it. And the one, you might think it was all very casual and stuff. Oh yeah, I was a seeker and I came across Maya Baba. But Baba's saying he's the one who provoked you to ask that. He is the great provoker from the essence of your being to ask this question. Baba has also said, I am the being of all beings. I remember in Mundley Hall once, Erich told us that Baba asked the question, where is the soul of this room, Mundley Hall? Is it in the floor? Is it in the ceiling or is it in the walls? Where is the soul? And so they're all sort of thinking about that. And the idea that Erich conveyed was that the question is mistaken. There's only one soul. There's only one soul. And then he said, Mundley Hall has its sort of cement rendered or plastered, and there's little indents on the wall, little shadowy parts, and Baba said, that's you. you are just the little indents there on the wall, but there's just one. And we are all one, as Baba said. It's just with our sanskaras are the little indents that's causing us to be, to be different, to have this barrier between us. I remember once also that, I really love that one, where Baba asked them, he said, told the Mundley, people think I know everything, but I know nothing. The Mundley thought, well, Baba, you know everything. You're all-knowing. That's one of the definitions. Baba said, no, I really know nothing. This is all a bit of a cover-up, I know nothing. And then Baba said, because I know nothing, because there's nothing objective outside of me to know. There's no subject-object in me. There's only oneness. I am everything. So I know nothing because I am it. There's nothing for me outside of me to know. So that's sort of that idea comes through there too. And of course, if he's the being of all beings, for atheists to deny God, they have to deny themselves from that definition. He says, I'm the being of all beings. Ross is. The isness is God. The Ross is something else, and everything else, tree is, stone is, everything else is. That's the divinity of God. But I'm so deluded by my own Rossness that I don't get to experience it. I once asked Erich about all this. I was sort of fed up. I said, Erich, look, Baba is the being of all beings and everything else. He knows everything. Why doesn't he just wind it all up? Give us all bliss. Why not? He comes back and has to suffer. It's a terrible business. Time after again. He talks about the jest on my chest, how I am the wisest of the wise and I caused such a foolish act of creation. So, Erich, why doesn't he wind it up? Call it quits. Forget the charade. What's all this about? And Erich looked at me like one of those Zen habits, Here's the question, and he's going to answer me, and he says, there's nothing to wind up. The fact is that I keep the whole show on the road. It's my asserting myself that keeps this whole ball game rolling. Because God is. And if I didn't assert, God would be only. But it's me asserting all this that keeps this whole show on the road. There's nothing to give up. Just stop asserting. But then Baba wants it, doesn't he? Because this is the whole love game thing. Anyway, we'll come to that in the Ghazals. Also, Jen reminded me the other day about that. Another lovely story in connection with this about Erich said that imagine Mount Everest and imagine years to come there might be a resort somewhere nearby which gives you helicopter rides in the morning to the peak. And you look out in the morning at dawn breaking, So you have your morning croissant and coffee, and you get on the helicopter, and up you go, and you land on this Everest pad there, and you get out all furred up, and you look at the dawn coming up. You take a shot, and you get back in the helicopter and come back down. Okay, so you've seen the dawn from Mount Everest, the highest peak. Erich said, compare that with someone who has this strong desire to climb it. They plan for months. They have to get fit for months. They have to get all the right gear. They have to find out the best path to scale this monster. And then through this, they get frostbite, suffer tremendously, and then finally get to the top and take in the view. Oh my God, it's a different quality of view. And therefore, Erich, if God just gave it to you, you wouldn't have really appreciated it. It's this whole journey to get there which makes you be able to see it. So that's what we're on. So it's all meaningful, and to wind it all up is Baba's not going to waste time on us. He doesn't want us to suffer for no purpose. But so there's a qualitative difference there. So in that statement, here's the very essence of your being which provokes you to ask that question. Here's the provoker. In the lagoon cabin, there's one saying there above Baba's chair, things that are real are given and received in silence. Well, that's the real first instance of it. He's the one that provoked you to ask the question. You don't know, that was given in silence. There's no way that we know that. Just that Baba has said, he provoked us to ask that question. That's the thing he's given to us. And I think that's his first gift. I'm not sure if Francis said this, but there's this saying about God-man threw me into existence, but it's the God-man who fished me out. God might have started this whole thing, but the God-man is the one we want to hold on to, because he's the one who can take you to the goal, get you out of this. But I think Baba provoked all these questions, provoked this question in us to awaken us. On the tomb, it says, I have come not to teach, but to awaken. Erich said that's not the complete saying. I remember him saying that. It says, I've come not to teach, but to awaken myself in you. That's the complete statement. So this provoking of Baba's is, I think, to awaken himself in us. Somehow or other he's in us, and that's a little trigger. It awakens us to him. And then, and because he's infinite, remember Erich saying this, because he's infinite, the shadow's infinite. So there's infinite variety of people, infinite variety of things here. And Baba says in the universal message, he says, I will help every individual to break free of his bondage in his own way. So he provokes us all, then there's this task of individually helping each one break free in his own way. I think that's fantastic, isn't it? Baba's very intimate and very personal. Remember, Donkin had that saying, it takes all sorts to make the world. If one sort is missing, you're one sort short. And, you're not part of the harmony. There seems to be, Baba likes all the variety, and we are all a reflection of that. And I suppose that also is the basis of deep respect for how Baba works in each person. Working with me as individual, there's no conforming here. The way Baba's working those people, I should respect that and just let that roll through, that's Baba's, what he's doing. And part of this awakening, I think, this provoking, then awakening, and then what happens is that the relationship is developed. This is what I've gathered anyway. And there's a different relationship for each person. And that's unique too. And you see that in artwork and the way people talk about Baba and so on. They have a different style, different relationship. And it's usually aligned with one's nature. Francis once said that he was had an artistic temperament, and that when Baba came along, he used the word that Baba didn't change the course of his life, but gave it sanction. So approved it, allowed it. Yeah, that's how you should be, you know. He just gave it sanction. And I like that thing too where Erich says that Baba said, when you're most natural, you're most godlike. You know, there's a part of us which is, you know, your personality is not your ego, I don't think. There's a part of us which can be most natural, and that's when you're most godlike. Anyway, that's something to be explored, I suppose, but we're not always totally dominated all the time by sanskaras. Well, I hope not, anyway. And even our experience of God realization, Baba says, it's unique to each person. There's no sort of default position. You know, go for a factory, God realization, that person, the next one. It's quite unique for each person. It's a very big operation Baba has going here, isn't it? It's a big thing he has on the road here. And this relationship we have, obviously, it goes over lifetimes. You know, and Baba provoking this question may have been because, you know, he knew you before, and some people coming to Baba is just realigning again a relationship with him. He often talked of his Mundali and close ones who were with him as Muhammad or even as Christ. And he takes control of all that. You know, Erich was told wonderful stories, of course, as a lot of us know here, about relationships. And there's one which really struck me about the king and the queen in sort of medieval India. And they were worshipping Ram, and the queen was very devout. And she had a temple in the palace, and she would spend most of the day in there, praying, singing to Ram. And the husband, the king, never went in there. And she was very upset about that because she wanted to share her love for Ram with God, with her husband, the king. And this went on. But one day, he woke up, and he found that his wife was incredibly happy. And that she has declared a feast day, a holiday in the kingdom. Everyone is celebrating for the whole day. And he's so happy because she's happy. And he asks her, well, what makes you happy? Because I will continue that. This is great. And she said, through the night, while you were sleeping, I heard the name of Ram escape from your lips. And the story is that he was so taken by that. His relationship was so intimate and personal that Erich said, this is a true story. This guy died of grief. He went out and died. He felt that his beloved had left him. It's just an example of how intimate some relationships can be. When you think of the Mundali, I mean, I think of Erich as being, you know, this sort of a servant unto death. And that incredible statement of Erich, you know, I choose to be a slave. With all my intelligence, my whole heart, I choose that. This is not someone just, you know, blurring into this role. And he would, remember Erich saying, you know, I would carry Baba up the Himalayas if it needed to do that. And you know, his relationship was just like a slave. He would just give his life like that. You think of Gava, and I think of, you know, just selfless service personified. You know, she looked after his body, and there was that sort of quality relationship. I'm just speculating here. I'm not sure myself. And then Mani, of course, effervescence, this joyful joy, the path of joy. There's something within her relationship which that's an integral part of it, isn't it? Her beautiful presence, lightness of being, and just her just sparkle, contagious. So now I'm going to move into Francis. What was Francis's relationship with Baba is the question. He was a poet, a Westerner, lived for Baba for 10 years. And he's interesting because he's a Westerner for one, and he's a poet, so he's got a poet's eye. So he writes well. A good poet writes out of his experience. Francis' experience just happened to be at the feet of a master. So it's interesting to see what this guy has to say. There's one passage which I'm going to read to you. He gave a talk in 1959 in the Bombay Press Club. Baba asked me to give the talk. This was just after Stay With God. He just arrived in India. He'd finished Stay With God. So he had finished this great opus, and Baba asked me to give a talk. And he titled the talk, "The Lord is Our Brother." The Lord is our brother. And this is a passage from it. And I'll read this. "The world is a stage of Baba's divine play, on which he does not only appear in the role of a saviour and bestower of boons, remaining aloof from the rest of the play as a spectator, merely approving, encouraging, correcting, condoling, rewarding the efforts of the players. He's not just that. He involves himself with us in the play as the intimate actor within each of us, as the hero within our hero, the heroine within our heroine, experiencing with us the entire action of the play. Our playing becomes the means of our becoming conscious of our part in his play." I'll read that again. "Our playing becomes the means of our becoming conscious of our part in his play. The Avatar is our eternal Lord and playfellow. He loves the play he himself created. He loves our playing of the roles of his play, and he loves playing with us in these roles." That's how I think Francis related to Baba, as a sort of a playfellow. And when you think of it, adult play, you have to imagine reality first, what it's like, and you have to play it. And gradually that playing becomes real. And with playing, of course, you're not egotistically driven. You're in the play. And it gives you, it's a space to sort of consciousness, I think, to enter into. And you follow Baba in the play. He loves it, you love it. So you hop in this sort of a play arena. And I think the whole Ghazals and things, they're a realm of poetry, but they're also a realm of his playing with Baba. They're a realm of this playing which is going on. And only in play, I think, with Baba can you actually, sort of with that attitude, transcend all the harshness and stuff. Not that you run away from it, but seeing it as Baba enjoying the play gives you a sort of a foundation. It's sort of it works for me anyway. I remember once Erich said, as an example of this, that Baba asked Erich, come and kiss me. "Do you love me, Erich?" Baba's saying to Erich, "Do you love me?" "Yes, I love you." That's Erich. "I love you. Well, come and kiss me." And you've got Erich up to come and kiss him, and kiss him a bit more feelingfully, and say you love me. And Erich said later on, this whole experience, he said, was Barbara's teaching us the ABC of love. You just have to play it through first, You need to pretend. "Yes, I love you, now kiss me." "All right, good." Like little kids, learning something, pretending. And of course, Barbara's made reference to it all the time, hasn't he? This life is a mighty joke. We take life seriously and God lightly. We should do the other way around. We should take God seriously and life lightly. Play it. Or play is the border between both of those things, I think. And this is how I think Francis wrote his poems. The page was the sort of arena where he played. And Baba turned up. And Baba was there with him in the creative act. And I think this is how he drew closer to Baba. It reminds me, Wendy said that Elizabeth had this saying, spur of the moment. And when she was, and I gather Elizabeth was a very thoughtful person, very considered things, But then when making decisions, she'd have this saying, well, it's spur of the moment. We have to sort of go for that. Being attentive and listening to what Barbara's saying, so you don't miss it. And of course, with her training, she was very well attuned to that, the spur of the moment thing. Oh, yes, go. That's what Barbara wants. I suppose it's sort of intuitive, not wildly intuitive, but well-trained sort of intuitive. So she just the spur of the moment. And I think that's sort of a bit how Francis worked with the play thing too. You know, I've got this playmate here, this playfellow, Barbara, and he's in on the game. So I'm listening to that. This may not suit everyone's relationship, and it may not be exactly how Francis is. But you find what yours relationship is. I remember asking Rano once, "What's your creative process? How do you go about drawing Barbara?" And she said, "In the morning I sit down and I have pencils and paper. Then I start drawing Barbara's image. If it comes, I keep going. If it doesn't, Barbara's saying to me, he doesn't want me to draw his image this morning." It was as simple as that. She said, "If it happens, I continue going. If it doesn't, I don't." So that's sort of listening again to Barbara. Most people would say, well, that's really a bit of a cop-out, isn't it? You know, art is 99% perspiration. You've got to turn up and keep pushing through. But she was at that point with Barbara. She was so intuitive with it, and I suppose Barbara's there as this playfellow, that she could hear or listen. And I think Francis had that very clearly too. He knew. He was saying, he was sort of got a little bit frustrated with it because he'd be writing these Ghazals and he's writing them and Barbara's sort of writing through him and he's writing them, but he's still there. I'm still here, Barbara. I'm doing all this stuff, and this is the rub. This is sort of the pain of it all. Yes, I know you're doing it, and that's fine. And for a while, this is great. But then after a while, it's sort of painful. It gets a bit painful for him. There's another thing too, which I think is sort of interesting. This Dina Talati, this old-time Barbara lover, she asked Barbara, "When you go into seclusion, how do we contact you? What do we do? You're not around. You're in seclusion." And Barbara replied, "Ask me here," pointing to his chest. He said, "And I will answer. But remember, the first voice you hear, the first voice is my voice." Sort of the spur of the moment or listening. Very soon another voice may contradict what you've heard. That's not me playing, that's another voice. This is not my voice. Only if you are prepared to hear the first voice, ask me. And with emphasis he added, "I will definitely answer." I think Francis got very good at hearing this first voice. And I think the Ghazals, people tend to think the Ghazals are just this pining away of the lover and the beloved. There are instances of that, but I think with Francis the Ghazals, you've got a mixture of the beloved and the lover in the Ghazal itself. It's sort of it's together. And there's there's a pain in there, there's a longing in there. But Barbara likes that because that's what he likes. He likes the love bit. He likes that longing in there, and he's working it, I think, because he enjoys that. I think he's sort of collaborating. In a way, Barbara's sort of a co-writer with these Ghazals. They're not sort of Ghazals calling, oh Barbara, you've got to do something about me. They're much more complete, they're much more contained, they're much more stand by themselves quite strongly. And they're not asking for Barbara to do anything particularly. They're just saying what is about love. Most of Barbara's Ghazals, I think, were probably written late at night at Meherazad, in that silence. He wrote through the night, Francis. He'd make tea and have his cigarettes, and he would write through the night. He had 3 months in Guru Prasad also every summer, so he may have written some there too. Probably one of the most favourite Ghazals which is going to be one of the most favourite Ghazals of Barbara's, and it's probably going to be a classic Ghazal, is this ghazal because of love. Baba asked it to be recited again and again. And I think it's this ghazal which Baba said to Francis, keep reciting it to me. And Francis asked, why, Baba? You've heard it. He said, well, I'm memorising it. So when I come back next Advent, I won't be quoting Hafiz, I'll be quoting you. What a compliment, eh? I mean, it's such something to say. But because of love, you know, in the Everything and the Nothing, there is that statement, one of the great statements. It really underpins, it's really a creation myth, a creation story. God is love and love must love. There's creation there. Must. A lot hangs on that word must. God can't sit on love. Love must love. It has to come through. I remember Erich saying about Baba too, he's the one who gets the pain in us if love's not happening. To come down and it's got to love. Love's got to happening. Love's got to happen. Francis said, love is not love unless shared. Love is something which has to flow. So God is stuck with love. It has to create. You know, there's somewhere in Hafiz which says God's Achilles heel or God's weakness is that he can't stop loving. It'll be the death of him. I mean, he can't stop loving. And this whole creation goes on. It's happening every moment. And before I read this ghazal, it's interesting to know that all these ghazals were read to Baba, this one several times, and it would have gone into Baba's ear, gone into Baba's universal mind and heart, and pleased him, if not brought forth a tear. It certainly earned Francis a kiss from these ghazals. And, you know, we are strongly concerned with archives, which is all good and proper. Baba's things and Baba's writing and photographs and clothing and things he used. But these words are sort of archival. They're not only what he wore, but went in. He heard them. And they moved him. So just that fact alone, I don't want to use the word sacred, I think we don't want to use it, but they have this sort of quality about them, that they are, because we can just print them out so easily, we don't have that sort of respect for them sometimes. But these words first went into Baba's ears and pleased him. Let me just read this through. So it has a refrain because of love, which is a traditional way of writing ghazals. Not all Francis has this refrain. The evening pianos have faltered into silence because of love. If I repeat a line, by the way, I mean, I heard Begum Akhtar once sing a ghazal, and it went on for so long. I went, how come it be so long? She goes back and does a bit there and from the first couplet, then sings a third couplet and goes back to the first couplet. She's all over the place. It's very jazzy, it's very improvised. But you've got the refrain to bring it back to the sort of this home note. But she was all over it, depending on how she felt or the audience or whatever. And it was interesting to think of Baba through these ghazals. You know, he would clap and stop it and explain something. Wouldn't that be wonderful to be there for that? Baba would clap and stop the singers and they'd stop full of emotion, you know. And he'd explain it, then they'd start up again. And this went through to, sometimes he was a good ghazal singer, Francis said, it'd go through till dawn. He would just be there through till dawn with these ghazals. So, if I repeat something, it's because of that. The evening pianos have faltered into silence because of love. The night trumpets have wailed their last notes of violence. The night trumpets have wailed their last notes of violence because of love. Love is the great backdrop. Whoop, and everything stops. How earnestly we pursue our roles in God's great game because of love. The freshening dream, the kiss, ever new and the same, because of love. Who, if he could hear his own voice, would go on singing because of love? The end remains covered, else few would make a beginning because of love. The end remains covered, else few would make a beginning because of love. If we knew it, we wouldn't set off. The difference between being pelted with eggs and showered with roses because of love is less one of talent than one's fate share, which time discloses because of love. That's a beautiful definition of karma right there. The difference between being pelted with eggs and showered with roses because of love is less one of talent than one's fate share, one's karma, which time discloses because of love. We sleep, sometimes we dream and awaken to a new day because of love. 1 billion years of wayfaring, yet still we don't know the way because of love. We would not yet even have broken out of the beast cage because of love if it were not for God-man's compassion and holy rage because of love. I think he's referring to our animal nature. We have not yet even broken out of the beast cage because of love if it were not for God-man's compassion and holy rage because of love. This is the last couplet. Tomorrow is another day for the battle's violence because of love. The few remaining hours of the night are for wine and silence because of love. The battle's violence is there. We wake up to it every day. But it's because of love. But then we have this solace of wine and silence because of love. The prose of the day and the poetry of the night, they're both because of love. I think the first ghazal, which was read, this is interesting. Baba gave Francis a translation of Hafiz, the Be Not Grieved ghazal. Baba had translated it roughly. He did this often with Francis and said, shape it up, put it into a tighter form. And then he said, I want you to read it at the East-West Gathering, 1962. 62. None of the ghazals weren't even known in Western literary tradition in 62. Maybe there might have been, Arbery may have been around, but they were rather academic, for academic sort of thing. No one knew of them. And here you have an audience of thousands of Westerners, and Baba wants Francis, in English now, to read this ghazal of Hafiz. I think that's significant. I think Baba actually wanted Westerners now to develop a taste for it. That the ghazals and this whole feeling of Baba's presence, which comes with them, Baba wanted that to be in Western consciousness. Otherwise, why have you got Francis to read it all out? And he's there, Baba's there listening. He's present. And Francis reads this out to everyone. And this is the first one. And of course, and I think we're just trying, well, for me anyway, just trying to get a sense of what these ghazals contain and what are they, how they really work. Because the English ghazal is a new beast altogether. Francis' English ghazal is not just a rehashing of a Hafizian ghazal. This is a new thing. New Advent is a new type of poetry. It's an English ghazal, and both those words are important. It's an English ghazal. So this is a poem which Francis read. It mentions the word guerdon in the first line, which means reward. Love's guerdon, love's reward. So there's thousands of people here, Guru Prasad, listening to this for the first time. Although you have not received love's guerdon, one day this desert will become a garden, so be not grieved. Do not turn your heart away, nor expostulate against the beloved, but bear your present state and be not grieved. Let this disgusted mind and troubled heart be stilled. One day desire for union will be fulfilled, so be not grieved. Behind the curtain a secret dance is being played, that you know not, so don't give up nor be dismayed or grieved. Once you have set out for the beloved's abode, do not let mere stones and thorns turn you from the road, or be much grieved. Maya will do her best to thwart your labour, but when you have a captain like Noah, you will reach safe harbour, so be not grieved. When this friend is the same as God, don't plague him with petitions, but suffer gladly love's rules, trials and conditions, and be not grieved. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And there's a truth in the poetry which you cannot convey in any other way. You know, it's beautiful. It's not evangelizing, that's for sure. But behind the curtain, this secret thing, it's sort of somehow that it opens up the imagination and the heart to receive these truths in some way which, if you just said it plainly or without the poetry, it wouldn't quite get it. And of course now, since this 62, the biggest sellers on Amazon.com are translations of Rumi and Hafiz. I mean, Baba has opened that up. Everyone is reading this stuff. Although I find Francis is more like a cognac, you know, with a tough drink. There's a lot of stuff is rather fruity and light, you know. And his can be a rather rough drink too. But Baba liked him. And I think a lot of that may be preparing the way for Francis's Ghazals. Okay, so here's... What's that? Maybe. I have one more, but how am I going? Let me read this one. So this fits in with a little bit like the Hafiz one. It has this little refrain, do not give up. Yeah. Francis says, though fate 1,000 times makes you a pawn in its game, though fate 1,000 times makes you a pawn in its game, do not give up. Cling like a child to the skirt of your beloved's name. Though the wave rises before you, awful as a mountain, do not give up. It's but a ripple on the pond of the knowledge bliss fountain. Though girls golden as goddesses come to you, do not give up. Behind their smile is the ever-loving, the true. Though earth be crushed under the hammers of the sun, though earth be crushed under the hammers of the sun, do not give up. When the wreck is swept away, before you will be the beloved's form. Though your beloved may look at you askance, do not give up. One day will come the invitation to the dance. Think of the men who went before, those who will come after. Do not give up. Earth, millions of times, our troubles are matter for huge laughter. The end of every affair was in its beginning. Do not give up. The conclusion of your journey is in your singing. That last couplet there, the conclusion of your journey was in your singing. This is a real theme in Francis. He sort of said, better alive serving God-man than dead enjoying bliss. This is where the action is. Eric will say, well, you'll become what you already are. You are God, so okay, fine, you get what you already are. But this is the place to be. growing with love and finding about love. And for Francis, singing is his sort of way of expressing that. Erich, Charlie Gardner told me this story, which is a very moving story about Erich. Some people asked Erich, do you have any vices? Erich. And Erich says, yes, I do. So everyone's all ears, Erich, vice? And he says, yes, I have one vice. And so they're all prompting, Erich, what is your vice? And Erich says, envy. I have envy. So everyone's thinking, how could this guy be envious? He's got the top job in the cosmos. He is envious of what? So, and then with Charlie Gardner was there, Erich, you need to explain this. What is this envy? And Erich points at him and says, I'm envious of you. And says, well, how can that possibly be? And Erich says, because my game will be up. You will have an opportunity to be with the God-man. I won't. Now that's a story of a lover. That's sort of give you those sort of stories, give you a measure of. He doesn't care about. He'd rather be back. And then Charlie, I told the story, and then Charlie said, "You didn't get it quite right. There's one other thing which you didn't say, and this was it." He said that Erich said, "I would come back 1,000,000 times as a mangy dog to gain one lifetime to comb his hair." So that's amazing, isn't it? Erich said that. I would come back 1,000,000 times as some mangy dog just to come back once to be able to comb his hair. These people are not hanging out for God realization. In a way, Francis thinks God realization is that's Baba's affair. His affair is just to sing and be with him. That's where love happens. And that's the main thing. There's a beautiful poem called People, which Francis wrote. It's a magnificent poem. The last verse, I'll just read, picks up on this theme. It says, wars and earthquakes and tidal waves will wipe out cities and waste the farmland, which is sort of interesting today. The ice will creep down, shearing off civilizations, but people will come up again. The earth will grow cold, but it will be replaced by another, for there must always be a place for people, a place on which to stand and sing. And sing is the praising of God, That's what we're for Francis, what we're built for. But this singing, he doesn't just mean singing. Anything that is done has Baba's flavour is lyrical. It sings. There's this wonderful line in, that's right, I was driving with Francis one day, the Wakehurst Parkway. We're driving along, and we're going on this curved bridge, this beautiful curve, it's beautifully constructed. And Francis is sort of saying, oh my God, this is the song of the bridge, he said. This bridge it's a song, the way it just curves like that. Just beautiful piece of architecture. It is an expression of truth, of this beauty. And, he just felt that. Oh my God, this is it. And so he would see that. Anything done well with love sings is lyrical as far as Francis is concerned. Making a cake, anything, whatever. In this image of him to God, the man, he has a great line. He says about Baba, what a proud new architecture is in your hands. I love that. What a proud new architecture is in your hands, Baba. From that this will in the future, something great will come from that. And then when In Dust I Sing got published, Francis gave Erich a copy for his birthday. And Erich wrote back, Dear Francis, the world will lovingly appreciate your gift of these ghazals. in the near future, and many a worldly minded will be affected by this strong wine of love and get intoxicated. This will please our Lord. Here again, this idea of art and things. I remember also, there's a lovely cable, of course, Baba wrote to Lynn Ott about painting, and he was exhibiting his painting at Chapel Hill, and Baba sent a telegram to him saying, the image of the God-man will help enshrine him in the hearts of his lovers. That's beautiful, isn't it? The image will help enshrine him in the hearts of his lovers. And I think the Ghazal, as Erich says here, will get worldly-minded people intoxicated, and they will lose their bearings a little bit. And this will please our Lord. Okay, how am I going for time? All right. Okay, one thing also which Erich said, he said the only real dialogue between Baba lovers is how do you keep the beloved present in your life? The rest is sort of commentary, really. That's the main thing. How do you keep the beloved present in your life? I mean, if you meet Baba lovers, and I think that's what we will come to, won't it? That'll be the real question. When we get over all our not so pleasant traits, but that'll be the real trait. I mean, how do you keep the beloved present in your life? That'll be the real dialogue. And I think poetry does that. All art does it. Anything done with love does it. For Francis, the whole poetry thing is that the poetry is not in the language. Language is a condition for the poetry to happen, but it's not on the page as such. You can't, by just constructing the words, make this poem. Francis said, resonance in a poem is not how you've got these consonants and vowels, everything else sounding beautifully. Resonance is a quality of the heart. It's somehow that comes off the page, and it takes you into some sort of silence. It's what's tasted. It's a felt thing. That's the poetry. And the mystery is somehow that this mixing of words creates that. And Baba is creating this, I think, a new flavour of poetry, a new type of appreciation of it, which is going to be different. And Francis Ghazals, some people said to me, is it poetry? It doesn't look like it, doesn't sound like it, it's awkward, it's sort of, it doesn't flow, it's not sort of, it's sort of too rough. All they said. So, but I think we have to develop a different taste for it. This quality of poetry is something, the words engender that, the words create that somehow. You can read some haiku stuff and you think, my God, that's fantastic. Something jumps off and it's only 17 syllables. Something happened, something sparks. Robbie Basho, who was a great guitarist, Baba lover. Had anybody heard of Robbie Basho? Yeah, he wrote to Francis and said, look, I'm having trouble with words, Francis. I've got this, I'm a great guitarist and his wonderful voice, but my words, I am having trouble. So Francis wrote him back a ghazal in answer to his question about words. And I think this is good ghazal in the sense that it applies to anything we're doing. If we get stuck and we're trying to do it for Baba and we get stuck, Robbie Basho is stuck with words, but it can be applied for anything where people get stuck. And this is what Francis wrote to him. A poet can't be stuck for words, for he only writes the words he really knows. Stop wanting to write. The words are already there, ready to flow when love flows. You don't have to think of words for something already named, such as a rose. All you have to do is to sing the beloved's name and wait until its pain grows. What to us lovers of Meher are the Himalayas and the eternal snows, Are we not the dust of his feet blowing wherever the wind of his word blows? Zen was once the fist of God, dealing many a black eye and broken nose. Now the path is through God-man Meher, who says, I come when your selfness goes. To make the point finally clear, one can only reap that which one sows. Knowing this, the real poet only puts down the words he actually knows. There's Francis, that's his poetics, his theory of poetry. It just comes out of one's feeling of love for Baba. It's as simple as that. He writes in one of his Ghazals, "O God, there is more to a song than wild horses of words made tame." I'll repeat that. By God, there is more to a song than wild horses of words made tame. One must sew up one's lips with the thread of the beloved's name. Yet there are many who still talk about the poet's craft. Shove them out to sea on a sailless and rudderless raft. That's sort of a gentle Francis's sarcasm there. He had no time for that sort of stuff. But some of his poetry is beautifully shaped, all the same. But the real part, the real thing is going to have to come out of love. That's really where it comes from. Okay, I'll read one more and I'll finish with that. So this is out of The Beloved is All in All. Everything is good, but nothing makes any sense. It's a fantastic opening line. In Genesis, God makes creation, everything is good. And, multiply and flourish, everything is good. But then Francis, everything is good, but nothing makes any sense. What's the purpose of all this business? That's really 20th century philosophy there. Nothing makes any sense, all this being and stuff, What's the point of all this? Existentialism, And so he calls it, everything is good, but nothing makes any sense. And now then the next line you see, and all postures we put on, except that of dust, are mere pretense. This is a big blustering line here. All postures, whatever posture you have, except that of dust, are mere pretense. They're just showing off, in a way. And then the next couplet, in each grain of dust, there is every form of precious stone. In each grain of dust, the seed of poetry has been sown. It's waiting in potential from creation. In each grain of dust, there is every form of precious stone. In each grain of dust, the seed of poetry has been sown. It awaits but a drop of spilt wine to give it voice. This is the Beloved's grace. It awaits but a drop of spilt wine to give it voice. When compared with its singing, all other music is noise. So that's what's going to happen later on when this stuff develops. When the lover's lips have become a rose and his eyes a nightingale's tongue. It's very surreal, Francis, at times. When the lover's lips have become a rose and his eyes a nightingale's tongue, the beloved listens with pride and joy to every note that is sung. And that's all that matters. This is more important than God realization. You listen to it, he's listening to my song. But who can set out on this terrible journey into nothing, even at the promise of eventual union with everything? But who can set out on this terrible journey into nothing, forgetfulness of self, even at the promise of eventual union with everything? And then he sort of has a little pleading here. Brother, do not listen to any tale about love's recompenses. This journey is only for those bereft of their senses. This is loss. And then he finishes with this last couplet. Everything is solid, but no thing has permanence. As in a dream, eyes and lips that I have cherished appear as bright bubbles on a stream. It's a new poetry. Everything is solid, but no thing has permanence. As in a dream, eyes and lips that I have cherished appear as bright bubbles on a stream. There's the beloved playing in there with Francis, I think. Enjoying those lines, helping him put them down, helping them capture them, fine-tune them. And Baba liked his writing. He liked money, Francis said there was 3 writers at Meherazad, Money, himself, and Erich. Bao wasn't writing English at that time. And they were all different. And Francis said, well, some reason or other Baba likes my voice. And so I keep writing. If he said stop, well, I would stop. I think he'd find it very difficult, but he said I would stop. I was in the barn the other day, I'll finish with this, and there's beautiful quotes there on the wall. And getting back to that theme I started with about God must be attained and lived. I think the Ghazals capture some of the statements there in the barn. For instance, real living is dying for God. That's in the Ghazals. You can find that. Real living is dying for God. Live less for yourself and more for others. One must die to oneself to be able to live in all others. One must die for God. One must die for God to live forever. No, sorry, correct that. One who dies for God lives forever. I suppose Francis Ghazals in his voice will live forever. You have this avatar who's going to recite him again when he comes back. So I think, Baba wants us to live, and to live is to love. And the Ghazals are a sort of a first record of documentation of someone doing that. It won't. Everyone will have their own way of doing it. Jai Baba. Jai Baba.